opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not represent or reflect the official policy or position of the Take a Paycheck Foundation and podcast. All information shared is from personal experiences and does not constitute medical advice. We do not take responsibility for any statements expressed during the podcast. Take a Paycheck does not endorse any products or services. Any said products or services mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you or your condition. Please consult with your physician if you have medical questions, as it may pertain to your condition.
Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Paycheck. I'm so excited to have Alexa join me today. Hi Alexa, can you give me a brief introduction about yourself? Tell me a little bit about your education, your job, if you have one, hobbies, and future plans.
Sure. My name's Alexa. I'm 24 years old and I live in a small city outside of Los Angeles, about 25-30 minutes. I graduated college in 2020. I studied liberal arts with a focus in creative writing. So I have a job in writing. I work for a wedding company. And yeah, for fun, I also like to write and read, and acting is also a big part of my life. So hopefully in the future, the goal is to publish books. I would love to be an author and just continue acting in different film and television projects and just kind of see what happens from there.
That sounds so cool. So you're on this podcast because you have a bunch of fun conditions. Let me know what those conditions are.
So firstly, rheumatoid arthritis, and then fibromyalgia, and then ankylosing spondylitis, and then recently Graves' disease. So lots of fun things.
Wow, that's a lot to handle. Like, I have this one diagnosis of juvenile idiopathic arthritis, and here you are having four. So how does that feel? Like, what was the timeline of like getting those diagnoses?
So rheumatoid arthritis, I was diagnosed at 15 months old. So I don't remember not having RA or the diagnosis process. 13 years old was when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which was, I think, like 7th or 8th grade. And that was a little difficult just because 7th and 8th grade is difficult already. And then last year was diagnosed with AS, and this year was Graves' disease. And I think diagnosis with Graves' disease hit a little harder just because I was about to turn 24 and I was just about being diagnosed with my 4th chronic illness. And so I was very sad and like overwhelmed at that time period. But now that I've had time to wrap my head around things, I think I have a better grasp on them. But yeah, I mean, it's not fabulous, but it could be a lot worse, obviously. So
Yeah, I feel like that too. Sometimes it's like at the moment you feel like your life is like over, but then when you kind of get a hang of it and try to understand what your new life will be, like adapting, it does get better. And I feel like a lot of people don't know that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I was so devastated. And then once you get a grip on it and you educate yourself on what you're dealing with, and thankfully there's so many resources out there that it doesn't seem so daunting or unknown because there's a lot of other people that are going through it too.
So how did you differentiate what was what? I mean, like at the moment right now, you're 24 and you have all of these conditions. How do you know, like, what is rheumatoid arthritis? What sort of pain is rheumatoid arthritis causing? What sort of pain is like AS causing? They do have like distinct features, but how does that affect you?
I would say rheumatoid arthritis pain I know the most just because I've been living with it the longest. AS pain is obviously spine and back related, so I'm pretty clear when that's going on, what's happening. Sometimes though, if I'm having a flare with my arthritis or fibromyalgia, it can be tricky to know which it really is, because even though they're completely different sorts of pain, I feel like when you're just exhausted and you are having a lot of pain, it's kind of sometimes hard to like differentiate what kind of pain is coming your way, if that makes any sense. I think it kind of just, especially fibromyalgia, it's kind of a head to toe thing. Like I always describe it like I'm just filled with sand and I feel really heavy, and just like every motion is so much harder because I feel like my limbs are heavier. So if I'm feeling that way, it's pretty clear that it's fibromyalgia, and then arthritis is joint pain. So yeah.
And what joints are impacted?
All of my joints are impacted. I have it in pretty much every joint. I do have ones that are more affected. I think my hands and feet are probably the most affected because I use them the most, but knees and hips are also affected. But I guess, I mean, I've had problems in elbows and other places, but as of right now, it's mostly just hands and feet. Yeah. I have to be conscious of what shoes I'm wearing and how long I'm going to be on my feet because that's probably where I feel the most pain. But I'll have days where, oh, my hips are really hurting today, or oh, my knee is really giving me a hard time, or my fingers are swollen. But rarely is it everything at once. If it's everything at once, then I'm in trouble.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was just curious because you did say that like everything is kind of affected, but arthritis is sometimes moving for a lot of people. Like it's not just constant.
No, yeah, thankfully. I mean, if it was constant in every joint all the time, I don't think I would be doing anything.
Yeah, no, same. And because you have these diagnoses, that probably means you're on medication and a lot of them. How does that work? What medications are you on? And what was that timeline? Like, how did that look like for you?
For arthritis, I've been on literally every single medication, but maybe 3 or 4. Like I've done the pills, I've done the injections, I've done the infusions. And I guess what my doctor has told me is that I've had kind of a stubborn case of arthritis and the fact that my body will become immune to the medications I'm on and then they just stop working altogether. So I've had to jump around to all these different ones because my body just keeps adapting to them and stop working for me. So right now I'm on Cosentyx, which is a injection I take once a month that I give to myself. And it's working pretty well for me. And then on top of that, I take medication for my fibromyalgia, and then for Graves' disease, I'm on methimazole, which helps regulate my overproduction of thyroid hormones that are released into my body. I think I covered all of them, but yeah.
Okay, so I guess it's not too bad.
It's not terrible. I hate needles and injections, so whenever my injection day comes up, I sort of panic, but when it comes to everyday pills, medications, I'm really not on that many, which is good.
Like I totally understand the whole like injection. Whenever I hear injection, it's like, please. And it's good to hear that you were able to do that. Like you're able to inject yourself. Did you have any troubles or like challenges trying to get to the point where you were comfortable with doing that?
So it's one of those pens. So it's not like I'm having to fully inject myself. My family used to have to do that to me. For one, I was way too young, and 2, I don't think I could ever bring myself to actually do that. So for a person that's afraid of needles, the pen is the way to go because you don't see the needle, you hear the click, and it's pretty mild pain. But yeah, once we found out I was gonna have to switch over to that, I was a little hesitant, but then I watched some videos and it was a little less scary. And then once I kind of started doing it, I got used to it pretty quickly, and it's not as big of a deal anymore, thankfully.
Do you experience like any side effects because of the medications that you're on?
I used to. Every once in a while I'll get headaches intermittently. I would say I experience nausea quite a bit. I'm always nauseous or dizzy, or I would say nausea is what I feel the most often. But I mean, when I first was on like methotrexate years ago, I had just a ton of side effects and stomach problems and all sorts of things. So I'm so blessed that this medication I'm on right now isn't giving me much trouble as of now. So fingers crossed that it keeps in that direction.
Okay, that's good. I find that a lot of people like that come on the podcast do mention that methotrexate seems to be like the most troubling one and the one that's caused the most side effects. Like even for me I'm on it right now, but when I was on the injection version of it, like I just felt nauseous, like you said, like hair loss, like so many things.
My gosh,
yeah, you like would never imagine that this would happen to you because I feel like they don't talk about it as much till you like get it and it's like, oh, surprise. Because
right.
This is what you're going to go through.
You did remind me though, there was a point in time where I have really thick hair naturally, but there was just a point in my life where I was losing so much hair. I vividly remember I was on family vacation and I just like brushed my hair behind my ear and just like a clump came out with it. And I was so like, what is happening? This is so depressing.
I know. And it sucks because we're like young teenage girls and like having like a clump of hair fall out in the washroom everywhere, just like constantly seeing it like wherever you go. It's hard. I don't know. It sucks, but I think you can get through it because I know that when I started on like folic acid, it helped me. And then my doctor recommended me like some sort of like supplements to help, and that really helped, but it did take a while. And just like that instant reaction of like seeing that, it is really sad.
It is, yeah. And it's just like you're dealing with so much already. And then you're like, oh my gosh, on top of this, I'm losing all my hair. And it's just not, it's one more thing to worry about.
Yeah, for sure. You kind of mentioned that your AS like affects your spine and your back, and then your rheumatoid arthritis is kind of everywhere. How does Graves' disease impact you?
Yeah, so Graves' disease, I was only diagnosed with about 4 or 5 months ago. So I'm still sort of learning the ropes with that one. But actually what had happened was I had started a new arthritis medication because I was diagnosed with AS last year, and we were still kind of figuring out which medication was going to work best for me. And I started having what I thought were allergic reactions to Taltz, which was what I was on previously, which is another injection. I was having just like crazy rapid heartbeat, and I was jittery all the time, and I was having hot flashes, like just these really strange symptoms that I had never had before. And so in my mind, I was like, well, the only thing that's different is the fact that I'm on this new medication. And I told my rheumatologist this, and she looked at my blood work and she's like, actually, your blood work is all over the place. I'm going to send you to an endocrinologist, which is the doctor that helps with my thyroids. And when I saw her, I told her everything that was going on, and she was pretty confident right off the bat that it was Graves' disease, which it was. So yeah, now that I'm on medication, I do have days every once in a while where my heart is beating a lot faster than it should, or I have weird hot flashes. But for the most part, my symptoms have subsided ever since I got on this thyroid medication. But yeah, and I lost like a ton of weight without even trying. It was just really happened all really quickly, and I thought it was to do with my new arthritis medication, but it was actually just a whole different thing going on that I didn't even consider it. But yeah.
I mean, how do you consider it? We have no idea with like what any of these conditions even mean, so it's like hard to even think about that. And I think the closest thing we think about is just some of the knowledge that we've already gained, and it's kind of like, oh, like my blood test, like that's what led me to my arthritis, and like so that's probably what I have to go back to. I'm just curious, like, what were the symptoms that you experienced? I know you were really young. Did your parents tell you why they kind of went to the doctor at first?
Right. Yes. So with my diagnosis with RA, I had already learned how to walk, and I one day reverted back to crawling, and my mom thought that was very strange. And so she stood me up and saw that one of my knees was like the size of a softball, and took me into my pediatrician, who then immediately sent me to a rheumatologist, and they ran a bunch of tests and were able to, I think, diagnose me pretty quickly, which is good. But yeah, she literally just figured it out because I went from walking to crawling, and babies don't really revert once they know how to walk, And so that was the first realization that we had.
Okay, so were they with you every single time you got a diagnosis? Like, I know they were there with like the rheumatoid arthritis and maybe the fibromyalgia, but what about the others, because you were older?
Yeah, AS, which was last year, I think I was by myself, and I was just having crazy lower back pain and sitting in the car for long periods of time, laying down, standing up, like I just couldn't get comfortable. And I got a couple x-rays and MRIs. And so my rheumatologist told me, and I happened to be at the doctor's that day by myself. A lot of times my family will come with me. And then Graves' disease, I was by myself, and I was not even remotely thinking it was going to be another diagnosis. I thought like, oh, my blood's a little crazy. I'm going to get on like a vitamin or something, and it'll all go back to normal. And then when she was like, oh, it's most likely Graves' disease. Well, first of all, my head went to Graves' disease. Like, that doesn't sound very good.
Yeah.
Grave, but yeah, I was by myself and I immediately called my mom after and I started crying. I'm like, what is happening? It's not another one, but it just happens when you get older, I guess. You just figure it out,
Yeah. And especially living in the States, did you have any like challenges for like getting medications or anything like that? Like I know a lot of there's a lot of differences between the Canadian and American healthcare system. So I'm just wondering like, were there any challenges? And one thing that I could potentially think of is that I'm assuming you didn't like transition care, or if you did, like how did that work?
Transition of care kind of just happened. It wasn't something I necessarily prepared for, or it was just one day I've been going to my pediatric rheumatologist since I was 1 year old, and you go to the doctors and most of the kids around you are 5, 6, 10 years old. And I was like, I think it's probably time I see an adult doctor. So she gave me recommendations and then I just started seeing a new doctor. It wasn't necessarily like a
Process.
a big process. Yeah. But over the years, yes, there's been plenty of times where I had difficulties getting medication, especially when I was a child, because a lot of the medications they tried to put me on weren't FDA approved in children yet. They were for adults, but not for children. And so we would fight with insurance, who would then fight with medication companies. And yeah, it's always been a battle. But in recent years, I've had decent luck getting the medications I needed.
Okay, that's great to hear. And we just talked a little bit about how your family was by your side, but were there other like family members? Because I know like a family is just not just parents. Like there's so much more to a family. So did you have any issues or struggles telling your family, or was everything like very positive?
Everything has been so positive. My family is always so helpful when I need them, and I think they knew what was going on with me better than I did when I was a child, because I didn't understand all the medical jargon and medications. I just did what they told me, and thankfully what they told me was always the right thing. I think with Graves' disease, I needed them more than I probably ever have, just because it was something so new for all of us, whereas arthritis and AS, which I feel like kind of go hand in hand, but I knew what to expect. And it wasn't like I was changing doctors. It was the same doctor handling both diseases. And so, yeah, Graves' disease, I needed a little bit more support and just more shoulders to cry on, because I was very, very upset when I was diagnosed. But, they all stepped up and we all did our research, and I'm just thankful that I have a family that's super supportive and has always been there when I needed them. So I can't thank them enough.
Wow, I'm so glad that you have such a supportive family. That's like so important, because at the time that you're like diagnosed, you're very vulnerable and you just need like support. And whether that be through like family or friends, you were diagnosed at like a very young age. And so
Right.
how did you tell your friends at like different points of your life, and how did you go about explaining it?
It's definitely different as you get older. As a child, I think kids slowly kind of figured it out because I wasn't going to PE classes with them, or, I would come into school late because I was at the hospital getting a treatment. And so I never really had to tell my peers. It just kind of was evident because of how much school I missed, or, X, Y, and Z. And then recently, it's again, I don't necessarily I don't meet someone and it doesn't come right out of my mouth like, oh, I have arthritis and Graves' disease. But a lot of times people will get into my car and see I have a handicap placard, and so that sparks a conversation. Or I'll meet someone and they follow me on Instagram, and I'm pretty open about what I go through on there, so they'll be able to find out from there. But yeah, it's not something that I'm hiding, but it's also not something I bring up right off the bat, but I do think it comes out eventually, or they figure it out, or
Yeah.
yeah, it just kind of comes up naturally, or they figure it out and then they'll ask questions. So
Yeah, no, like I totally like I've experienced that too because of like this whole podcast. It's kind of like I'm not going to be like, hey, look, I have arthritis, but obviously if you see me advocating for rheumatic disease or showing someone else's story, like hopefully you can connect the dots.
for me, if I talk about it on social media or interviews or podcasts, it probably means I'm more than happy to talk about it in my personal life too. So if someone has a question or it would never bother me if someone brought it up before I had the chance. It wouldn't bother me. Actually,
I think it depends on how they bring it up. I think that was like my thing. It was kind of like I agree with you, like because I've put it out there. Yes, ask me questions, like I'd be so happy to answer, but it's like just be mindful of how you bring it up.
100%. Yeah. And I think too, a lot of times people's way to bring it up might be they're trying to be funny, but then it comes across really rude or insensitive. But I try to remind myself, it's like the only reason I know this world so well is because I've been living with it since I was 15 months old. But someone who has never dealt with a chronic illness or lived with a close friend or family member who has a chronic illness, it's such a new world for them. And so they might say things that rub you the wrong way or come off super uneducated, but they just don't know, And so obviously there are some jerks out there that are just really rude, but I've tried to have more compassion for people that maybe say the wrong thing off the bat. And then I, kind of explain to them what is really going on with me or what the right thing is that they should have said. And then they're like, oh, I had no idea, is usually the case after I explain myself,
I've had it since I was 13, and I feel like in grade 7 and 8, it's kind of an awkward conversation to have with people, but they always saw me like getting accommodated. There's obviously like a lot of questions that like kids our age have. They're like, okay, like what's going on here? Like, are you lazy? Like, why do you get to like stop doing gym? Yeah. Sometimes I feel like, okay, like, can you not have that many questions, or can you not have that many comments? But I feel like it's so normal for them to have that. Like, I think I would too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like kids are curious about everything. They want to know everything. They think they're know-it-alls. And so of course they're going to ask a bunch of questions. And especially even younger than 7th, 8th grade, there's like a weird sense of jealousy. Like they don't realize that we're getting special attention because we're disabled. They just see it as like, well, why do they get to do that? And why do they get to like leave school early? And it's like, I would rather sit in a classroom for 5 extra hours a day than have to have arthritis,
Yeah, for sure. I feel like a lot of people don't understand that, and they're like, oh, you're so lucky. But yeah, I
especially with like theme parks and wheelchairs or like using a handicap placard and not having to walk far, they're like, oh my God, I wish I had arthritis. Like, you're so lucky you get to use a handicap placard. I'm like, I would rather walk 5 miles to get to the entrance of the supermarket if that meant not having arthritis. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I guess no one knows it till like they get it. And it's like, oh,
exactly.
Yeah.
Then they'll take it back.
Yeah. So you had pretty supportive friends is what it sounds like. But did you have any ups and downs with the school building and like the school staff or accommodations? Like, how did that work for you?
I definitely, the people that gave me the most problems over the years were faculty and teachers. Like the kids would wrap their heads around it. They were much more open, but I vividly remember I went to Catholic school growing up, and we had a nun that taught our religion class. And the time that I always came in was during her class. Every other Friday, I was getting infusions in the hospital. So I would show up to class late to her class every single week. And she was just so irritated by it and was just like, oh, like, look who decided to show up today. And I'm like, I was literally in the hospital. Like, it's not like I rolled out of bed late and, went to get a pedicure. Like, I was sitting for 6 hours with a needle in my arm, and I'm so sorry that I'm disrupting your classroom time. But it was always comments from teachers or principals, and I ended up switching schools so many times because they weren't willing to accommodate my needs, or they were just giving me such a hard time. And when you're going through pain and misunderstanding at that young age, the last thing you want to do is be fighting with, teachers and people that are supposed to be helpful and understanding. So I would end up, or my parents would make the executive decision of like, no, if you're not going to help us in the way that we need help, then we'll move on to some other school that will. But yeah, and then in the end, I ended up doing like independent study and homeschooling, and the school system was just a little tricky to wrap our heads around. So we ended up just leaving.
That's crazy, like that you had to like come to the point where it was like, okay, like homeschooling is what will work best. And it's not like it was a bad decision, but it's just like it sucks that you had to like go through that to like finally be like, okay, like this is what I'm gonna do now. And also like on the social aspect, like you probably made friends and then you had to leave them, and then it was like, how did you feel like emotionally and like mentally?
Weirdly, I loved being the new kid. I was that kid that loved attention on me, which is terrible, but I'm just being honest. But every time I went to a new school, it was always like, oh, who's this new girl? And I loved it.
Okay.
But no, there was definitely times where I had made good friends that I was sad to leave, but I was usually always leaving because something had gone sour. So I was never super sad I was most of the time never devastated to leave because
Yeah.
there was a reason why I was leaving, if that made sense. And yeah, sometimes it did get old because, starting over and having to explain to a new set of teachers and a new set of principals gets exhausting, but it kind of just became second nature. And I think what's important for someone to learn with a disability is that you are always going to have to be advocating for yourself. Like, whether it's to family or friends or where you're working or where you're going to school, it's like you have to speak up for yourself and you have to tell other people what you need. You can't expect them to just know. And so I got really comfortable doing that with all those changes, which I think helps me and has helped me as I've gotten older, because I was so used to it when I was younger. But yeah, you have to tell people what you need, because they don't know, they're not living with it, and they don't know the best way to go about it. So it's just best to be honest with them.
Yeah, I'm curious about what were some of those accommodations that you did ask for, but like were not fulfilled, or like that like they didn't help you with, if you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, as I was going to high school, the transition from 8th grade to 9th grade, it's a big deal, at least in my city, of like, okay, where are you going to go to high school? Because we have lots of private schools, there's lots of public schools, but obviously we didn't care about what was the best school. We just cared about what was going to be the most accommodating to me. And there were so many schools that were just not willing to work with, we go in there and we're like, look, there may be a time where she misses 2 weeks of school back to back because she's suffering from a flare up, or she may need to leave school every other week to get, her infusions at the hospital. Are you okay with her missing this much school? And they would say no. And so automatically we would just, brush that one off and go to the next one. It was kind of just like a checklist of like, okay, are they willing to work with us? Yes or no? And then we'd kind of just go through it that way. But it was crazy. I think times have changed, and I don't think a lot of the things that they said no to, they'd be able to get away with in this day and age, because I just think we're a much more accommodating society. But yeah, it was crazy to see how many schools were like just honest with us and saying like, no, that won't work for us. So
Wow. Wow. And that probably took a toll on your parents as well, because they were the ones kind of doing the fighting when you were so young and like advocating as well. So they learned all these skills, but to like see their daughter kind of get like rejected from schools in a way that like they couldn't even control, and like it just was so unfair, like that must have been really hard for them.
I'm sure, honestly, I have never really asked them. That'd be an interesting question to just ask how they reacted to that sort of thing. I definitely know they were probably pretty upset and angry because, yeah, like you said, it's not like I could control it. It's not like I was leaving school because I was like an athlete and I needed to go to soccer practice or something. Like it was something completely out of my hands. And to see that people still weren't willing to work with that is kind of crazy. But I mean, good riddance. If you don't want me, then I don't want you. So
yeah, that's like the best attitude to have. Like literally that is the best attitude to have and like the best mindset. And I'm just curious, because you did do online school, did that help you like decide what your future career path was, or like were there any benefits to that?
yeah, I mean, online school was good for two reasons. One being I didn't have to answer to faculty and staff, and of course I was going to get exactly what I needed because I was me and my family were my own bosses essentially, or, teachers. But then it also gave me I was so much more comfortable. I wasn't sitting in hard wooden chairs all day. And if I needed to take a break to rest my hands from writing, like it just gave me so much more freedom. And then, yeah, I've also talked about with my family how I think moving to online school completely changed my kind of like life path or career path, I would say, because if I had continued going to high school, I probably would have gone to a in-person college, and I always thought I wanted to join a sorority and like do that whole thing. And I grew up acting, which I think I mentioned earlier, but when I went into high school, I had made the cheer team and I kind of just wanted to like focus on being a student for the time being. So I wasn't focusing on acting anymore. But once I got into homeschooling, I had so much free time on my hands and I wasn't getting social interactions in school, obviously. So then I started taking acting classes again and meeting friends. And then that gave me more time to pursue a passion that I had kind of walked away from for a little bit. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think that online school gave me that time and to focus on something I was super passionate about, and I'm super thankful for it.
Just to like clarify, so you did college online as well?
I did. Yeah, I did all 4 years completely online. And I'm not a school like there are people that just love school, and that was not me. So not having to go to in-person class every day and listen to lectures was perfect for me. Like I said, I like reading and writing, so it didn't bother me that instead of going to a lecture, I was reading a lecture. You know what I'm saying? So it worked for me because of that I liked reading and writing. It didn't bother me, but I can see how some people, wouldn't thrive in that environment. But for me, it really worked, and I didn't want to chance going to in-person college because I just knew from past experiences it probably wasn't going to work. So yeah, I couldn't be happier to have made that decision.
Wow, that's great that there was something that like was offered, because I find that a lot of people here in Canada, like I've talked to a lot of youth and young adults that want to do online education and like university, because there's a lot of universities that just won't accommodate them, but they weren't able to find like anything that works well. Like they physically can't go in person, like it's just really hard, but they haven't found like a program that works. So it's interesting that you were able to find that. How did that work?
So independent study, essentially like homeschooling, but you have a campus and teachers that you report to if you need them. So if I wanted to, I could go into them every day and they could teach me, or because I was fine doing it myself, I could do it at home. But, I still had a principal, I still had counselors, and so when I needed something, I could go to them for it. So yeah, I had a fantastic counselor in high school that knew my whole health situation, and I said I wanted to find a online school that specialized in creative writing, and she literally gave me a list of them. And because I don't like school, I looked at the first one, I read a little bit about it, it looked like it was going to line up to what I wanted, and so I was like, this is the one. And then I went to school there. I didn't really like put much time or thought into it, but it ended up completely working out, and I don't know how it worked out so perfectly, but it did.
Yes, that's amazing to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think like if anyone kind of needs that sort of guidance, like it's great if you could like reach out to like your guidance counselors. Chronic illness also affects the social aspects, and we've talked a little bit about it, but I'm curious to know, like, has it affected your dating life?
It has. I've only seriously dated one person, and I think it was the most I've ever learned about myself, dating someone else in every aspect, but especially with my disability, because while I was dating him was when I was getting diagnosed with AS, and it was just such a strange, it was just an interesting time to be dating someone, but also going through something and so much pain. And he knew me so well that he always knew when I wasn't feeling well or when I was tired or something, which was nice. But I felt so seen all the time, and I felt like it drew more attention to like, oh, you're not feeling well. Like, what can I help you with? Or I don't know. I felt so seen at all times, which is good. Like, I'm so thankful that he knew when something was wrong, but I think it made me feel so much more disabled than I ever had felt before, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, just it brought up conversations that I had never had before, because the only people I ever spoke about my disability with was my family. And so letting someone else in and trying to catch them up on like 23 years of life was a lot, and I feel like there was times where I was overwhelmed and I felt really insecure because I was like, well, he's not going to want to deal with this, or some guy eventually isn't going to want to deal with all these things, and they're just going to want someone that is going to be pain-free all the time, because when you're in pain, I'm sure you understand, it's like you don't want to be touched, you don't want to be like talked to, you just want to like veg out, and it's sometimes hard for people that, I mean, he didn't know, and he didn't know the right things to do, and sometimes it caused friction, but overall he was pretty great. And like I was very thankful to have someone that asked questions, and he did his own research and things like that. But after we broke up, like I felt all those insecurities creep back in of like, well, who's going to want to deal with this? And especially when I was being diagnosed with Graves, I was like, oh my God, it's a whole nother ball game now. And I just have too many things wrong with me. And definitely, I think that has been my greatest struggle, is like my own insecurities toward my disability, and just assuming that other people aren't going to want to have to deal with it, like that I'm burdening them, which I think, I'm just going to have to get over, because it's not going to change for me. It's like not like those things aren't just going to go away. And so been working on like confidence and just educating myself and reading about other people's stories. I mean, thankfully, like social media, I've been able to interact with so many other people and read about, how they overcome troubles in their relationship, or how do you explain this to a new person? There's so many great people out there that are willing to talk with you and share their stories. And so it's been cool to read them and know that I'm not alone. And there's a lot of people out there that would not feel burdened by it, but of course that naturally is the first thought that comes to your head.
Yeah, it's like human nature to feel that way.
I mean, I think too it was a tricky time, because a lot of the times I feel fine and I'm not having any problems, and I go through months of having really good months pain-free, but it just so happened that like while we were together, I was going through a pretty bad rough patch, which is a good thing to remind myself though too. It's like it's not always going to be like this. It's not always going to be so hard or so like strenuous, because there are a lot of really good times in my life where I'm healthy and happy. And, so I think it's always going to be changing. Like your health is always changing. Your mindset's always changing. But to just remind yourself that if someone isn't willing to learn about what you're going through, or if they find it burdening, then like that's not the person for you. And there's a lot of other people out there.
You are actively involved in the community, whether that be with like acting or just advocating through arthritis organizations. So in 2010, you volunteered as a youth advocate for the Arthritis Foundation. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and what you learned from this trip?
Yeah, it was an amazing trip. I went to Washington, D.C. and spoke to Congress about getting more medications FDA approved in children. And it was really special to be around other kids my age that were also fighting for something that they felt so passionate about. And we were so young. I mean, I was like 12 at that age. So I actually really want to do that again now that I'm older and probably way more aware of what I would even be talking about. Because when you're 12, like I don't even know if I made any sort of impact, but I felt really good doing it. But yeah, I was heavily involved in the Arthritis Foundation, especially when I was younger. And I was always comfortable sharing my story with other kids my age that were dealing with similar situations. And now as I've gotten older and I'm pretty active on social media and I have a blog, and it's just a different form of advocacy, reaching out or finding other people with like-minded situations. I feel like social media is a great place to do that. And I'm not even a huge social media person. Like I'm not on it at all times, but I have seen that there are lots of positives to apps like Instagram and TikTok and things like that, where you can so easily connect with people to feel less alone.
What did you learn from being an advocate in the arthritis community?
I learned from an early age that I wasn't the only person dealing with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, like because I was always surrounded by other kids my age that were dealing with it, which I think is awesome now as I'm older, because it was always, I think as a kid you can feel so alone and oh my gosh, no one understands me and I'm the only person going through this. And being able to be involved with something like the Arthritis Foundation with other kids dealing with similar situations helped me feel less isolated, and just kind of made me more confident in what I was going through at such a young age. Like I was always talking about it. I was always educating people on it. So it felt less like scary, or it felt less like something I had to be ashamed of because I was so vocal about it.
You are an actress, most known for your role in Deadly Cheer Moms, which was released in 2022, so this year. When did you know that you wanted to pursue acting as a career?
My mom put me into acting when I was like 3 years old. I just liked talking to people and I liked being the center of attention. And so she put me into acting, and until I didn't really start taking it seriously until high school. And then I decided like, oh, I really enjoy this. And I really enjoy the people that are in this industry too. And yeah, in recent years, I've worked on a few different television shows and films, and it's just so up my alley to just be around like-minded people who enjoy the arts and being creative. And I really enjoy it, and I just hope I can keep on doing it.
And do you get any accommodations when you do go on set or you're acting? How does that work?
For a long time, we were always under the impression that if I were to ever vocalize that I have a physical disability, that it would keep me from getting roles, because it was just one more thing that they would have to accommodate. But now, as times are changing, like the entertainment industry is way more inclusive of people with disabilities. But I really haven't ever needed to ask for many accommodations. I usually always get sick when I film. Like you're just so, you're working really long days and you're sleep deprived and you're not on your normal schedule. So I usually always end up like getting a cold or something. So when I get sick, of course, I'll have to ask like the medic for extra medicine or like, I don't know, things like that. But in regards to my disability, I haven't yet ever had to ask for accommodations. But like I said, it's a way more accommodating time, especially for the entertainment industry. So I wouldn't feel afraid or like I was going to lose a job if I mentioned I had arthritis or something like that, because they're much more open-minded about it now.
So you have never experienced any like negativity towards your disability while filming?
No, I really haven't. But like I said, I've really never talked about it on a production I've been on. Like maybe they know because they've looked me up or something, but I've never had a conversation with someone on set about needing an accommodation or anything like that, just because I've thankfully always been healthy when I've been working, which I think if I was going through a rough patch, I would probably have to walk away until I got better, just because it can be a very demanding job, and especially the long hours and you're on your feet. And so hopefully I don't have to ever cross that bridge. I'm sure it'll happen and I'll have to figure it out when it comes. But as of now, I've been pretty healthy enough to work on all the projects that I've worked on and haven't had to ask for any sort of special help or anything.
You've been in a lot of other things as well. I don't know if you want to share some of your acting life.
So yeah, most recently I just did Deadly Cheer Moms, which there was a lot of dancing and cheering involved. I was a little apprehensive of that just because I didn't know how my body was going to handle it. But I think when you're so excited about something and you're so like ready to tackle it, I think my body kind of like just pushed through until we wrapped. And of course I got sick. And so I think your like enthusiasm and excitement kind of your body knows you're doing something that it needs to do, and it'll hold out for you. But yeah, I've worked on quite a few different projects. It's very rewarding to be able to work on projects, especially when there's times where I literally wasn't able to get up out of bed by myself. And I would have thought that working on a set with other actors on hit TV shows, I was like, there's no way that could ever happen. But I think when I have those experiences and when I am working or a show comes out that I was on, like it's such a reminder that like you can do anything you want to do. Like even in the lowest of lows, you're not going to be there forever. You know, like things will turn around and you can accomplish something that you never would have thought was possible when you're at your worst day. So it's like just because you're in a bad part of your life because of pain or a new diagnosis, like you're gonna get through it and you're gonna figure it out, and then you're gonna accomplish something crazy and something super cool that you would have never thought was possible. So just keep going and see what you can tackle, even though you have a chronic illness or 4 like myself.
Thank you so much, Alexa, for joining me on today's podcast episode. We talked about your diagnosis story starting at the age of 15 months old, which led to the different medications that you've tried. And then we discussed your other fun diagnoses and how your interactions with your family kind of changed over time and became stronger. We talked about how to navigate friendships and your move to online school. And then we started talking about a little bit of your dating life, how it works when you live with arthritis. And last but not least, we discussed your advocacy work and what it's like to be an actress with chronic health conditions. So everyone, like, comment, subscribe, check out Alexa's social media channels, which I will link down below. And I'll see everyone in 2 weeks on Take a Pain Check. Thank you so much, Alexa. Bye.
Bye.
I can't hide, 'cause growing pains are keeping me